Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another Torchwood review. And today's Torchwood review is Fragments. So, what is Fragments about? Well, it goes into the backstory of Jack, Toshika Santo, Owen Harper, and Ianto Jones. Now, there is some backstory we'll get into later down the line in a separate video, which will be the very beginning of the Torchwood series about Gwen Cooper. But essentially, because of the origin story and the pilot of the series being about Gwen, this just focuses on the rest of her team. So Fragments starts off with the Torchwood team essentially being lured into a kind of old factory, only to discover that the factory is all lined with bombs and for the roof to fall in on them. All of the group get pretty much pummeled underneath the debris, and Owen, Toshiko, and everyone else finds themselves in a situation in which they have to try and move themselves out of the rubble. Gwen manages to just barely get herself out, whilst the rest of them are suffering in agony. During this time, they begin to recount everything that's happened to them before they join Torchwood. Now, the first person we should go back in time to visit is AA Captain Jack Harkness. After leaving the Ninth Doctor, Jack finds himself back in time on Earth, struggling to find the Doctor. He begins to question whether he will ever find the Time Traveller again and be reunited with his friend. He gets drunk and starts spewing over in a bar to someone about the fact that he knows the Doctor. This is when the Torchwood Institute decide to take a fancy in him. It turns out that Jack has made an enemy of Torchwood already, as they were built in the something century to essentially hunt down the Doctor and destroy any alien evidence. The fact that Jack is currently in the era of Victoria, it really doesn't help his case. They begin to torture him for answers on the Doctor's location, and when he can't give up, they decide that the only thing left to do as a punishment to Jack, especially as the fact that he can't die, is to make him work for Torchwood. After a while, Jack gets relentless and tries to quit the job, but they point out that they'll just keep killing him and torturing him after all. Jack is an alien. So the two women who work for Torchwood convince him that all he has left in his life is to work for Torchwood. Over the centuries, Jack does a lot of missions, and one day comes across a girl who's a soothsayer. He begins to ask her when he'll get to see the Time Traveller again. And she points out that it will be a whole century before he ever achieves this. Jack manages to work alongside a lot of Torchwood teams over the years. However, one day when all the Torchwood team are supposed to be celebrating New Year's, Jack turns up to discover half of the team have been shot dead due to the fact that one of the team have had a vision of the 21st century. The last remaining member of Jack's Torchwood in the early 2000s decides to shoot himself through the head, pointing out that they're not ready for the 21st century. Jack then decides that his new crew of Torchwood will no longer be trying to hunt down the Doctor. Instead, they'll be trying to defend the Earth against alien threats and also trying to help those who just need to be helped. Next story we'll go into is Ianto Jones. Ianto Jones was someone who, as most people might know from other stories, was essentially, he worked for Torchwood already. He worked for Torchwood too, but due to the fact that the events of the Battle of Canary Wharf, he finds himself unemployed from Torchwood and searching for a new career. However, he can't give up his Torchwood life and starts chasing down Jack just to get the job. Eventually, after an incident with a giant pterodactyl, Jack decides to give in and let him join the team. Toshiko Santo. Toshiko Santo was a very brainy kind of doctor who knew how to build stuff. She is originally seen in the Doctor Who universe when we have the Slovene episode and a pig starts running around the corridors. However, Toshiko Santo only ends up joining Torchwood due to the fact of her making a supersonic weapon. She makes the weapon correctly due to the fact that she knows that some bits were missing from the component. However, what she doesn't take into consideration is the people she built it for are going to use the weapon against her own mother. They never considered letting her mother free and keeping to their agreement. So, Unit turn up and arrest Toshiko Santo for making the weapon, and they put her in a locked up cell. Jack, with his influence under Unit, manages to secure Toshiko from the prison, promising her a life on the outside rather than incarceration. He believes she has skills that would help his team, and that everything that she has done is not her fault. The next and the final in this whole lineup is Owen Harper. Owen was a scientist who hoped to help cure people of many different diseases. He was also a well-trained doctor. However, the only thing he never managed to see until it was too late was the dementia that started to eat away at his wife. However, one day when Jack comes crashing into his life, it turns out that the dementia that is being caused in his wife was actually an alien parasite. A parasite that was eating away at his wife's soul, and he'd never be able to free her from its grasp. Owen then begins to contemplate why Jack invaded this scene and why he destroyed Owen's life. Owen blames Jack for every little thing that has happened to him since, and points out that he was living a happy life and was about to marry the woman he loved. If it wasn't for Jack, his life would be ruined. Owen then gets given the job by Jack to join Torchwood to help better the world. Jack is sorry and can't take back what happened to Owen's wife, but he will definitely try to avenge him by giving him a new opportunity. Everyone at the end of this episode eventually manages to make it out of the building, reuniting with Reese as they look outside and watch as a hologram turns up. It turns out that John Hart did this on purpose just to attract their attention, and then Gray pops up on the screen and traumatizes Jack as he sees the face of his little brother, a boy he thought long dead. So, what did I think of Fragments? It's a very solid story, and I love the way that it goes back in time and takes us back to the beginning of a lot of these characters' lives. I love the traumatizing bits, the horror factors, and most importantly, I love how we can more relate to these characters after this episode, in the fact that we can relate to them being traumatized and finding themselves in a position in which they either work through that trauma or they carry it with them for the rest of their lives. And the fact that Jack has assembled this team and they all kind of have that in common, I think is perfect and exactly points why Torchwood works. And for that reason, I give it a solid 10 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next Torchwood review. Until then, goodbye, stay beautiful, and have an incredible night, you beautiful people.